In this lesson, you're going to continue to explore testing, and the goal here is to figure out how we can test asynchronous code using Jest. Now, it's going to look super similar to what we've already done when testing our synchronous code. We'll just be making a couple of small changes to the test cases to get support for testing asynchronous code with Jest. Now, before we even get to that, I want to take a quick moment to add a command line argument onto our Jest command over here in package.json. This is going to keep Jest up and running, and Jest will automatically restart rerunning our tests when either the test case code changes or the code that's being tested changes. So it'll be similar to how NodeMon restarts our Node server when we're running in development mode, though this time it'll be doing the same thing for the test cases. To configure that, all you have to do is add a new command line option on right here that is --watch. That's it. Now we can restart our test suite using the same command. It's still npm test, and it's still going to run those test cases, but one thing you'll notice is that it doesn't bring you back to the command prompt. So up above, I can see the results of that test suite running. I have all of the test cases running for passing, which is great. Down below, we now have a list of options for when we're in this watch mode. Now it's automatically going to rerun tests that do change right here. I could press A to run all tests again, and I can use other options to do things like quit the watch mode with Q. So right here, I can type A while focused on the terminal to rerun things, and I could always use W to bring those watch options open again. So this is what we're going to use going forward, so we don't have to constantly head back to the terminal and manually rerun things as we change our test cases. Now, if you want to explore other command line options that are supported by Jest, you can view all of those over in the documentation. So over in the docs sidebar, if you scroll way to the bottom under API reference once again, that's where we found expect, you'll see Jest CLI options down below. This page contains every single command line option you can use. In the right-hand sidebar, we have a list of all of them. And if I scroll down near the bottom, we have the one that we used right here, watch, and there are a bunch of others, though watch is the only one we'll actually need. So with this in place, we now have a slightly better setup, and we're going to focus on figuring out how we can test asynchronous code using Jest. Let's get started with a very simple test case to illustrate a specific point. So right here, what I'm going to do is call the test function, and I'll set up this demo test case. I can call it something like async test demo. Then I'll also go ahead and set up the callback function to run, which contains the testing code. And all we're going to do inside of here is use expect to perform an assertion that is clearly incorrect. Let's go ahead and do just that. I'm going to expect that the number 1 equals using to be the number 2. Now, clearly, that's not the case, and based off of what we know already, I would expect this test case to fail. If I save the program, that is exactly what happens. Jest automatically restarts rerunning the test suite, and if I scroll up, I can see that 2 was expected, but 1 was received, so async test demo has failed. Now, nothing shocking there. What we're going to do, though, is introduce a little bit of asynchronous programming by simulating it with setTimeout, and we're going to see how that changes the behavior and the output of this test case running. Right here, we'll call setTimeout like we've done dozens of times so far. We'll pass in our callback function and the amount of time we would like to wait. I'll go ahead and use 2 seconds by providing 2000 milliseconds as the second argument. And down below, all we're going to do is take our call to expect, we're going to cut it out of its current location and paste it right here inside of the callback function. Now we can go ahead and remove those extra lines, and we'll just rerun the test case like we did before. So what's going to happen? Well, our function's going to run. It's then going to register a callback function to run after 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, this function is going to run, and then our assertion will be performed. So let's go ahead and save the file, and then we're going to count to 2, and it's done. So what happened? clearly it didn't wait those 2 seconds, and clearly something's gone wrong because down below, async test demo is passing, even though the assertion we're performing is clearly invalid. The problem here is that Jest didn't know our test contained asynchronous code, so it simply ran the function. By the time the function was done, no error got thrown, so what did it do? It considered the test a success. It didn't wait for those 2 seconds to pass to see that the assertion would fail later down the line. The entire test suite only took less than half a second, so it definitely did not wait the time necessary for this failed assertion to actually run. Now, all we need to do to address this is to add a little bit of extra code to tell Jest this is asynchronous. All we have to do to tell Jest this function contains asynchronous code is to add a single parameter onto the callback function. Now, we're going to name this done, but you could technically call it whatever you wanted, and it's your job to call done after everything is complete. So after your asynchronous process is complete and your assertions have been made. So when we provide done as a parameter, Jest sees that, and it won't consider this test case a success or a failure until done is called. So all I'm going to do is add a call to done right here. That'll make sure that Jest actually waits for set timeout to finish and for our assertion to be created and made before figuring out if the test succeeded or failed. Now if I save the program, we'll notice it actually takes more than 2 seconds, so it is indeed waiting for those 2 seconds related to set timeout, and we can see we have a single failing test, which is perfect. If we scroll up to the test case itself, async test demo, we expected 2, we received 1, and that's what's causing the test to fail. So when we're working with asynchronous code, we have to make sure that Jest doesn't consider our test a success or failure before we've actually finished the asynchronous process. And this is one approach. You provide the done parameter and you call done, well, when you're done. Now, there are other ways we can get this done as well, especially when it comes to working with promises and async await, so that's what I'd like to talk about next. Now, we are going to need an asynchronous function we can actually test and to continue on with our little demonstration before we worry about testing the Task Manager app. We're going to go ahead and grab one of the functions we created in the playground directory earlier in the class. So over in the playground folder, down below near the bottom, I have async await, and I have an add function. This add function adds up to numbers, but it waits 2 seconds first. So we're going to figure out how we could test this. Then in the next lesson, I promise we'll actually start to test our Express application. For the moment though, what we're going to do is copy this function to the clipboard. Now, if you don't have this in place for whatever reason, you can always download the lecture zip for this lesson to grab it. So take a moment to do that if you need to. And we're going to bring this function over to math.js. I'll add it just below Celsius to Fahrenheit, and I'll make sure to export it down below. Down here, I will set up add as something I'm exporting, and I'll save the file. Now, over in the math test file, we can go ahead and load that in our require call up top. I'll make sure to grab add right here. And then down below, we're actually going to use that inside of a test case. Now, I'm going to leave this one in place for the moment as a demonstration of asynchronous testing. So down below, we'll go ahead and add another call to test to create a new test case to test our promise-based asynchronous function. The structure of the test case is still the same. We'll set up a name for this one. I'll say something like should add 2 numbers. Then I'll go ahead and set up the test case callback function. And in this case, we are going to provide that done parameter, so Jest knows that something asynchronous is happening inside of here. And down below, we're going to go ahead and call add. I'll call add, adding up the number 2 and the number 3 for the total 5. Now right here, what we're going to do is call then. allowing us to provide a function to run when the promise has been fulfilled with a value, in this case, the sum. We'll get access to the sum right here, which is exactly what we explored much earlier in the class when working with promises. Now, inside of here, it is our job to do the same thing we were doing up above. We make our assertions and then we call done. So right here, I will be expecting that the sum equals the number 5 using to_be and passing 5 in. Now at this point, we'd call done since our assertions are in place and we know the asynchronous process has finished if this function's actually running. And here we go. Now we can go ahead and save the program to see what happens. Now before we do, let's go ahead and comment out this test case up above. That one's going to fail by default, so we'll go ahead and prevent that one from running for the moment, and down below we can see what happens. A few seconds pass, and right here we can see that every single test case is a success, which is fantastic. That means Jest did go ahead and wait for the sum. Following it, it made the assertion and it called done. Now, if any of these were to fail, the test case would fail. So if I was expecting the number 6, clearly that would be an issue. And down below, after a few seconds, we would see the failed test case. So I'll revert that, bringing it back to its working state. And we're going to explore one more way we could get this done. So what we're going to do is use async await. And to start, we will call test and we'll provide a name. Should add 2 numbers, async await. And then we'll provide our function to run. This time though, we're going to mark the function as async. So what is this going to do? Well, yes, it's going to allow us to use await inside of here. But let's remember what we also know about async functions. They always return a promise. When your test function returns a promise, Jest is going to see that and it'll wait for the promise to either be fulfilled or rejected before figuring out if the test case should be considered a success or a failure. So what does that mean for us? It means we can use await inside of here and Jest will actually wait till everything's done. So we're going to go ahead and recreate the exact same test case up above using the alternative syntax. So right here, const sum equals whatever comes back from awaiting our call to add. I'll go ahead and add up the number 10 with the number 22 for a total of 32. And down below, all we need to do is make our assertion. I'm expecting the sum to be the number 32. If it is, great. If not, we have a problem. Right here, I'll save the program to rerun the test cases. Down below, we wait and all of the tests pass, which is fantastic. And just to prove this is actually working, let's go ahead and mess things up. I'll switch 10 over to 11. That should cause our assertion to fail, and I would expect to see a single failing test. Right here, it's running through the process, and we do indeed have that failing test. So when we're working with promises, we can choose to either use done, though this approach is a little less common. It's more common to use async await because of the benefits the syntax provides. The same benefits we get when using it in our program. Less nested callbacks and easier to read code. So there's no challenge for this video as I just wanted to go over a couple of basic concepts. So here's where we're going to go from here. In the next lesson, we're going to start the process of setting up a test environment. So if we are going to interact with our API, we're going to be reading and writing from the database, and we don't want to mess up our development database or our production database. So we'll quickly set up a test environment with a test database. Then we'll focus on testing the Express application. I'm excited to get to that, so let's jump right in to the next lesson.